Hello everyone and welcome to the Redmen TV. I'm Steve Hood. This is Chloe Blocks and we are here with our review of Doubters to Believers Liverpool FC Klopp's Era. The 4-part docu-series is available now on Amazon Prime. Chloe and I have watched all 4 episodes. We're going to go through the major talking points, what we learned, what we liked, maybe what we didn't like. If you haven't seen the documentary yet, press pause now, go back and watch it, and then of course come back to us, unless you just want to get the spoilers anyway. We are going to spoil the documentary. I mean, technically it spoiled itself because we already know what happened, but you get what we're talking about. Chloe, it was an interesting one. Obviously, when we got access to watch all 4 episodes, I was unsure about the format that it was going to be, because obviously there'd been talk that it was meant to be just a complete review of Klopp's final year after he'd announced, of course, that he was leaving, and then there was rumours that it had pivoted away. It turns out that that's what had happened. It was almost... It looked like it was meant to be that, and then they've kind of pivoted into an overall look at Jurgen's tenure. So it was very back and forth between the here and now and him leaving, and also the great success we've had in the past with him. How did you find it as an overall watch before we go into specifics from each episode?
Obviously, at first, it's a bit sad because, you know, you feel like you've just gotten over it. Like, there is happy times around the football club right now, but then you also remember what you once had as well, which, you know... I will forever miss Jurgen Klopp. I think that's fine to say that. But it was a little strange because it cut from the good times to then obviously last season, which ended in disappointment. But at first there was a lot of positivity and hope that maybe we could send Jurgen out on one of the highest highs that's ever been. So to chop and change from winning the league to then losing the league, to going back to last season and losing against Everton in a Merseyside derby, like, it was hard to watch because you got emotional and was like, oh wow, like, it takes you back to the good times. And then you're instantly hit with the reminder that Jurgen Klopp lost his last ever Merseyside derby. And it was, you know, they got to sing You Lost the League at Goodison Park and things like that. So I enjoyed it overall, but it was hard to chop and change between like the good times and then realising what could have been last season.
It's interesting because it starts, for those, I'm guessing even by this point you've watched it, if you haven't, so we're going to spoil that, like I said before. It starts with January 2024, which was obviously pre-Norwich City, when Jurgen decided he was going to step down. And at that point it appears it's just going to be, we're going to follow Jurgen from this point onwards. Yeah. And apparently that was what it was going to be. Then obviously, in hindsight, they had to go back and change it. So then we learn more about Jurgen Klopp, the footballer, and Jurgen Klopp, how he become a manager. Yep. The interesting one I took from that part of the thing, Chloe, is the story of how he became the Mainz manager. Of basically, the manager at the time was having a tough go of it. The players, they were losing games. The manager tried the old tactic of, right, I'm going to walk out. When I come back, you're going to tell me, do you really want to play for me anymore? And the manager goes out and he comes back in, and the players have decided, we're going to tell him no, which he probably wasn't expecting. And it's put on Jurgen Klopp's plate to tell him, actually, no, we're not behind you. The club stick with the players. Ask Jurgen to manage, and yet before you know it, and Rafa Honigstein, obviously German journalist in the thing, says that decision of FC Mainz to give it to Jurgen on a temporary basis did obviously not only change the future of Mainz, which was a huge positive for them, it actually changed football. Without that director of football, if he'd have backed the previous manager in almost like a butterfly effect, we wouldn't have had all this. No. You know, isn't that weird? Yeah. If that man's decision to go, okay, we're going to back the players and get rid of this manager because they clearly hate him. If he decided to go the other way, we might not be sat here having this conversation. All of this built around here is based, a lot of it, on Jurgen Klopp's success. It was a weird butterfly effect moment that one man's decision has impacted so much, because it leads to Liverpool being Premier League champions. And
it was a case of like, he was stumbled upon it, didn't he? He
had no one else. He couldn't find anyone who wants to manage Mainz.
And first of all, the manager literally caused it himself by saying, do yous back me or don't yous? And then they wanted to get rid of all the not the elderly, the old players, and Jurgen was one of them, so he then became the manager. So it is this knock-on effect, and obviously if he hadn't won of like any of the first 4 games, he might not have been manager. But the problem was that it was just a temporary thing, and then he started winning games of football, and it got to a point where, you know, the board and that couldn't turn around and say, there's someone better for the job. So it was kind of like they just stumbled upon his brilliance. And it's mad because it's not like you hear a lot of the modern coaches now and they have to go through all their coaching licenses and there's like a lot of experience and, you know, you build up, you go into the under 21s, under 18s and you build your way up through the academies and you usually get smaller jobs, then build up to create bigger jobs. But it was a case where he was a player, he wasn't that good of a player. And I loved how he was questioned about like his playing time. And he just laughed because he was like, you can just say I'm shit. Like, I know I was.
The fella goes, you know, you've worked with top players. What was that like? Because you weren't exactly the... And Jürgen just laughs and goes, yeah, you can say I was crap. It's interesting because it's worth mentioning as well. We should have said this. We're going to go back and forth here because it was a long documentary. Mad. They filmed with Jürgen after all this. So the plan was originally to go through the season step by step and he's getting interviewed at various stages, as are some of the players. They then went back and interviewed them later to fill in some of these gaps, like we're saying. And actually later on, it gets a bit weird where you're watching Jürgen at the time compared to this Jürgen, and it's a bit chalk and cheese, how refreshed he looked and things like that. It's interesting, Chloe, because one of the overriding themes throughout all the episodes, and like I say, there's loads of different story arcs obviously following Jürgen, they constantly keep going back to his development of young players, and there's a couple who are brought out in each episode. In this one, for example, it's his work with Conor Bradley. It goes into the Chelsea game where Conor Bradley has a real good game. It also talks about Curtis Jones a little bit in his development, and it moves on throughout the different ones throughout the course of the 4 parts. I found the Curtis Jones bit fascinating because the first thing Jürgen says about Curtis Jones, Curtis wasn't the nicest lad in the academy. He knew he was the best and he was telling everybody. And then Jürgen goes, I never had in doubt that he would make it with his ability, and he never had any doubt either. And then it cuts now to Curtis Jones now, and he's a nice, charming young man. We now know he's got a family and he's grew up. And Jürgen's like, I'm so proud of the man he become. He basically is implying, well, he says it, like, we had this brash, cocky young lad who was a bit of a dick, and we've decided, you know, between us, he's grew up, he's developed, and we're taking it upon us. So I think Jürgen's actually very proud in that moment of not only Curtis to the player, because he said, I had no doubt he was clearly good enough. We've actually, Liverpool Football Club, developed him as a guy, because he was a bit of a dickhead, and we don't have that in this club. We have that policy of no idiots.
Yeah, they do. And like you said there, it's touched upon throughout, you know, his entire career and throughout the entire documentary. And the main thing about that is that everyone who they speak to, whether, you know, it's obviously David Wagner or it's, you know, the players themselves or, you know, journalists, reporters, it's always Jürgen was willing to give people opportunities, no matter who they were, no matter which club he was at. I mean, we'll go on to speak about Dortmund, but, you know, Dortmund didn't have endless funds and they were going up against a giant in Bayern Munich. And yet he went and found youngsters from the academy and just backed them at a young age. I think Mario Götze is the player that they use in this instance. So it goes to show how much development. And I think in the documentary as well, Jürgen, there's a quote where he says, when I first came in, I told the club, I told the team, the players, I am your friend, but not your best friend. And it's kind of a case in that. And with Kurt, obviously, we've seen him grow as a footballer first and foremost, but also the man, the person. You do need to be a little bit arrogant to make it. You just do, because you're subjected to a lot of criticism. You have to think you're the best at times. You have to manifest that and you have to become that. But at the same time, you need to do it in a way where you're still humble. And it seemed like at the beginning, Curtis Jones was very much like, I am the man. I am going to make this. And you look at Jadon Danns and that further down the line, and he's got more of an approach. And bear in mind, he came through when Jürgen was already there and the rest of the staff were already there. So this kind of mindset is already being framed when he's coming through. But his opinion of it is, I'm so grateful for everything, for even just being here. I'm seeing all my mates drop like flies in the academy. They're not making it and I'm still here. Where Curtis Jones wasn't like that. Curtis Jones was very much like, I'm not asked about who makes it or not. I'm going to make it. And it's clear to see the influence that Jürgen and his staff had on Curtis Jones to become a better footballer, but also to make sure that, you know, you don't take things for granted. You're not a knobhead, first of all. And that, you know, you're someone who can take the highs well, but take the lows really well and bounce back and be able to see everything in a better picture as well. Because if you do the things that Curtis Jones did, the lows, the way you can get so down on yourself can be really dangerous. Where if you're willing to sit back, take a seat and look at the bigger picture of things, then, you know, you can take the criticism, but you can also take the advice and develop on it.
It was interesting because, again, we're talking about this. This is obviously episode 1 mostly. We have to watch this for work. Bear in mind, we did this. We're doing this. We're reviewing it. It's our jobs, of course. But having watched episode 1, would you have gone, I can't wait to watch episode 2? Because I'll be honest, it felt a little bit slow burny. We didn't learn that much about it. We heard Jürgen's story of, you know, Mainz and Dortmund. I think we already kind of.
If it would have, but here's the thing: if it would have carried on that frame, I'd have been all right. Because, like, I wanted it to be the story of his entire career. And I think that all of that's vitally important for him to become Liverpool. Like, you learn about the person. Yeah. And even though I know I adore Jurgen Klopp and I feel like I know him already.
You're friends with him, you can say that.
Yes, thank you. Even though I feel like I know him as a person, it's good to see what he was like back then and how he developed and how, you know, the clubs that he has managed, they've all been really similar in the way they have an outlook and how it's not just what you do on the pitch, it's also the way you speak, the way you hold yourself, the way you make sure that you are one with the fans and you are a voice for the fans. So I actually enjoyed that. It was just when, like, it took on individual players, I was like, this is kind of taken away from him a little bit. I get it.
Yeah, I found it difficult sometimes to follow the streams because I get what they were doing. They were going, it was back and forth. So we're telling the story of Jürgen whilst telling the story of his final season. Yeah. And it became like, so you talk about Mainz and it fast forwards a little bit and then it goes back and guess what? At times I thought it'd become a little bit difficult to watch. Maybe, again, listen, I'm not a documentary maker, but I thought maybe if it was more chronological, it might have been easier. Yeah. I enjoyed the dipping in of little focuses at times on players. But for example, you're talking about Mainz and then you go into a feature about Conor Bradley and then you go to it just, I don't know, I found that one tough.
Especially when, like, once again, you're just bouncing all around the gaff from his entire 9 years at Liverpool. And
why do you think he didn't go chronological? I'm not a documentary maker, I get it, but do you think, I was trying to think, this could have just been, the first episode could have just been a little bit of a retro.
Dortmund, how he then went on holiday and how he got the call and instantly, like, I would have loved that because once again, you talk about it and it's because it was supposed to be his last year. Everyone thought we might do something special. In the end, we didn't. We won a League Cup, which is perfect for, you know, the story because of how we won it and who we won it with. But because everything was set around it being the last season, it felt very much like they had to pick out individual games or players or player performances and use that as a way to go back. And, like, it'd speak about, I don't know, like, a certain, it was just absolutely mad. It'd speak about, like, Pep Guardiola and you'd go all the way back to 2018-19 when, like, we lost to them or when it was all over the place.
I did find the jumpy nature of it quite tough to follow the timeline.
Yeah, it was. Like, I kept hating the fact that I just kept hearing about individual stories of players when I just wanted to know about Jürgen. But I understand why, because they played a vital part in the last part of his season, especially with that League Cup.
I just think they could have. I think he could have done an episode on his start, and then the next one could have been young players he's developed, and you could have done all these stories. But it was. I don't know about you, but
I really enjoyed Wagner talking about.
Because there's stuff with all, and again, it's difficult because we're Liverpool fans, and Amazon Prime, it's going to be all over, and not everyone's a Liverpool fan, so you've got to. But I think the episode 1 should have just been introducing Jürgen the man, from how he became a football manager to how he got the Liverpool job, and then you could have went from there. The fact that it was back and forth, I found confusing.
And I really did enjoy learning about, because obviously I knew that Bayern Munich was a juggernaut, but I knew about Mario Götze, obviously World Cup winner, gets an unbelievable goal for Germany in the final. Like, I get the people were speaking about and the clubs were speaking about, but when you go back to that moment, I didn't realise just how they developed Mario Götze and how he was a very young kid. And Jürgen just went, can he play in the Bundesliga? And they were like, yeah, I think he's old enough to play in the Bundesliga. And Jürgen went, brilliant, that's good enough for me. Like, I enjoyed, because you're setting the scene. And it's important to know what he's gone through in the past to know how he got here. So I really enjoyed actually that little deep dive into his past career. Once again, when it got to Liverpool, it just felt like there was 101 stories you were trying to tell me, and I just wanted to focus on Jürgen himself.
I agree. And so let's move on then to episode 2, because actually this one I found better in terms of it was a little bit easier to follow. So episode 2, it's basically from Jürgen arriving at Liverpool, what he walks into. The interesting one here, and again, it's something we lived, something we know about. It was how Jürgen had to get the fans back on side. Liverpool fans had become a bit disillusioned with the football club. Yep. Things had gone really sour towards the end of Brendan Rodgers' reign. Players had left. There was having not long previously been through ownership things, and then the mood was dour. Liverpool had been, very, very close to becoming Premier League champions, and then really fallen away quite badly before he arrived. And the one key theme towards the start of this one, Chloe, was him fostering an atmosphere, and it was 2 ways really. It was getting the fans on side. It goes back to that Crystal Palace game, and him talking about maybe the fans were, I think, I felt left alone. It goes to the West Brom incident with the Olays, with Adam Lallana even saying, we felt quite embarrassed, but Jürgen was adamant, we need to do this thing. And then it touches upon very, very briefly, skirts around the Sakho incident of him getting rid of Mamadou Sakho rather. I thought that was a real key part of the documentary. Like, this guy's walked in and he's kind of realised, this isn't just a football problem. I need to reinvent this whole football club. The mood around this club is not conducive to success. And I enjoyed the fact that it focused on that and how he went about trying to foster a relationship and a mood and an environment where Liverpool could be successful, because it would have been impossible to be successful in such a negative atmosphere with perhaps some characters who he believed weren't ready to be part of this journey. Yeah,
and you forget, because of how in love you are with him, you forget that at the beginning people actually weren't 100% on board, or at least like that's how it's painted out in the documentary. I was 100% on board, but it still took a little while for, the speculation of if he was good enough, if he was the right man for the job, to be, and to stay our manager. And like you said there, the previous episode did speak about Mainz and Dortmund, and both of them were in turmoil, both of those clubs. You had Mainz, who obviously was struggling, and Klopp actually, when he was playing in his playing days, they needed a point to get promoted, didn't he? And he scored a goal, but he was at fault for 2 of the goals that cost them promotion, and he cried on the pitch, and you see all that. And their club's in a little bit of turmoil, and you see how he gets everyone on board and how that happens. And then you go to Dortmund, and obviously they had a problem with being bankrupt and things like that, having not a lot of money, and how they're still trying to, overcome that, and how he had to make the mood of the club a better outlook and be more positive. And then in the second episode, you have him coming into Liverpool and him seeing that the fans aren't even believing in the squad, aren't believing in what's going on the pitch. And if you can't, as a fan, invest your adrenaline and your belief to the players, the players are going to struggle. So it was about just making us recognise who we were and recognise that we can build something brilliant here, but we need you just as much as, the football team and club needs me. And like you said there, it was good to see, because there was the Crystal Palace game, was it, where, people were just getting off and he was fuming, and he talks about it in his press conference. And then the next week we draw 2-2 to West Brom, and he's making them go over to the Kop as a recognition for saying thank you for being here, for staying until the final whistle. So yeah, I enjoyed that aspect of it, because he realised that, everyone's got to fully invest for this to work. And he also recognised that for a lot of football clubs, sometimes football clubs don't need the fans to produce. Like, it's not all about them. Where this football club, us fans live and breathe absolutely every second of it. Yeah. And we are the biggest weapon for Liverpool. We are the biggest selling point for Liverpool Football Club. So he needed us to be on board to help him organise and reconstruct Liverpool's entire future under him.
Yeah, so again, the relationships and the fostering that relationships is really good. Again, this back and forth nature, which I struggle with, we see Liverpool having that loss against Arsenal where there was mistakes.
I don't know why, though.
It's weird. Yeah, it's odd. Why. And then we go back to like Jurgen building his first team and like signing Mohamed Salah and the story behind that. And obviously getting Virgil van Dijk as well, and Jurgen saying, you know, we had no doubts about the fee. Like everyone was talking about how much money they spent, and it shows clips, doesn't it, of people doubting the fee, and Jurgen is steadfast in his opinion, like, we wouldn't have spent that money on that player if we didn't think he was that good.
Do you know what I do enjoy about it is the fact that you've got to see two sides. So Salah wasn't actually a player he wanted, but he went with Michael Edwards and he went with all the data and everything behind it, where Virgil van Dijk was very much his, and it was like, we've identified him and he is the overall. So I enjoyed seeing that. We've seen it before, we know before. He tries to look always on the positives, but he didn't always get his way. It was near the end where he slightly got his way a bit more, but at the beginning, he did have to settle for what the club and what people above him thought was the better outcome, where Virgil was a signing that they all agreed on. Mo Salah wasn't a signing. Mo Salah was one where he wanted someone different, and he knocked on his door and went, Mo Salah is what you need. And he went, sure, let's go for it. And look at how well that turned out.
That was a very good decision, wasn't it? And then obviously this episode ends actually with the Champions League loss to Real Madrid and the reaction around that. Again, that episode again with the back and forth nature. I actually enjoyed the start of it more, Chloe. I mean, obviously it ends with a European Cup final defeat. It's never ideal. But I loved the fact of with telling the story of Liverpool was a shit show when he walked in. I think for us, we knew that. But again, there will be a lot of people watching this documentary. Like, I remember watching the Chicago Bulls documentary, Michael Jordan, and I didn't really know as much about it. So basketball fans and fans of the Bulls and stuff will have known more of these stories. So I do understand the idea of you having to set the plate, because some people like will be watching this who don't really understand how bad it was. Yeah, so overall, episode 2 thoughts at this point. What are you thinking when you were halfway through watching these? Were you like, I can't wait for episode 3? Because I'll be honest, by this point, card on the table, I was like, I hope this gets better. I've enjoyed certain parts of it, but then there's been bits where it felt hard. It took a lot
of brain power is the only thing I can say.
It's not a chill watch, is it?
No. I enjoyed, like, I get the Salah and Virgil moments because they are big, big moments. Even Sadio Mane, where it touches on that, the first real part of the puzzle. Like, I understand because they ultimately are major parts of his entire team. The Trent one as well, that's really good. And also the fact that he walked in, and it's important because the first week he was there, he literally went to watch Trent score for the academy. So like it all comes together that in a lovely little bow. It's when you're hearing about Jayden Danns and Harvey Elliott and Conor Bradley, and like Harvey Elliott more so now, I get it, but like it just felt like it could have gone better and kind of. It
feels like I did. I'll be honest now. I'm going to say this a lot. You might be different for you. I did struggle with the back and forth nature, like introducing Jayden Danns in this topic. With all due respect to Jayden Danns, and again maybe they were expecting Liverpool season to end a little bit differently. Jayden Danns' impact overall, and he gets to the League Cup final, and he plays in that. But like, it felt like out of place in this episode. I didn't really see the logic.
The thing is, though, is that like you could have made an entire episode on literally us winning the League Cup. And that's when you'd have brought Conor Bradley in. That's when you'd have brought Jayden Danns in. All of that. Curtis Jones you can still have in, maybe not the first episode, but he was one of the first youngsters that he brought through. So that I'm fine. Him and Trent being in the same episode, and even Harvey Elliott, you can put him in that, because you've got 3 different things there. Trent was instantly Pep Linders saying, this is someone you need. You've then Conor Bradley, who he actually sent out on loan and Pep Linders was fuming about, and he eventually gets his chance. And then you've got Harvey Elliott, who they identified as a young player, who they were like, no, we need him now. And Curtis Jones, who once again is the academy player, but he needed more development than, say, a Trent in terms of behaviour. So I enjoyed all 4 stories. I just feel like they could have been clumped together in one episode.
It did feel like a lot. It was a lot to process.
Once again, I understand why. It's because they obviously set the idea of it being all to do with his last season, thinking that we could win a Premier League title. Let's be honest, let's not sugarcoat it. And it did not go the way we wanted, and it wasn't even like it was close in the end. So they've then had to somehow get all the footage that they've made in the final season and try and relate it to other parts of his Liverpool career to link up and, you know, fluff it out a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I did feel like that at times, I must admit. Shall we talk about episode 3? Because
we should.
Episode 3 starts with the Harvey Elliott family.
I just don't get it though.
I like Harvey and I know his dad, and I like the fact that they were on it. And you know, the story of, I enjoyed this story. This was how Harvey signed for Liverpool, and like.
But what has that got to do with like Jurgen Klopp? Like, I just don't remember seeing a lot of Jurgen Klopp in this moment.
No, this part was like Elliot and his dad, and he cried after he signed. He pulled over the car and had a hug. It's a wonderful story.
A great story.
Yeah, again, fitting it in the piece and all that kind of stuff. They've got a dog called Paisley because Bob Paisley, because it's fantastic. They are diehard Liverpool.
Love
that
it.
comes across. And then we come back to live, for lack of a better phrase, Chloe, or like, you know, modern times as this was being recorded. And I found this one really interesting. This is where Liverpool are they've signed Darwin Núñez, and Pep Lijnders is doing his absolute best to get Darwin feeling more confident. He goes on, you see this all, it's fun. This is really good. I enjoyed this part of how, you know, how a coaching staff talks to a player who may be feeling a little bit low. Pep Lijnders brings him in, and it's clear they are trying to, this is more carrot than stick, you know, and they are saying, no one in Europe's got as many goal contributions as you. You know, they're showing the facts. You've scored and assisted more goals than anybody else. They're showing him clips of the things he does well. They're showing him clips of things that might want to get better. But it's all positive. Sometimes there's, you know, you think maybe you'd call him in and give him reading the riot act. It wasn't that with Núñez. They identified his numbers were actually quite good, but they clearly sensed there was something not quite right. Because this is Pep Lijnders effectively calling a guy in, and he's got a PowerPoint ready and clips ready and numbers and stats, and they're really doing their best to give Darwin Núñez a bit of a boost. I enjoyed this part of the episode because I thought that was something we've never seen before. I haven't seen that on any documentaries, really. Yeah,
it's really good because you get to see, you know, how it actually plays out. And it's fair to say that they're just trying to boost Darwin Núñez's confidence. That is what they're trying to do. They're trying to also get across what they want him to do, but most importantly, they're trying to basically say to him, you need to believe you're good enough here. Because
that's the line. Sorry, Klopp, to say that. He says, and Klopp says, and this is part of the interview at the time, I always say to the boys, you don't listen to anyone else. If I tell you that you're good, then you're good, because I've seen a lot of good players and I know a good player. I thought that was a fascinating line. Yep. Like, you're here because I think you're good. If you weren't good, you would not be here. I thought that was a real fascinating line. They're really trying their best to get Darwin. Like, come on, mate, come on, you're good. Let's just believe in yourself.
Yeah, and he clearly has so much raw ability. I think maybe it is just the pressure that he hasn't been able to deal with. And you can very much tell that you don't get to see these one-on-one like sessions that happen literally every day inside a football club. And some of them will be specific to an opponent, but this very much wasn't. This was like his overall game and where he needs to be in between defenders and when to make the runs. But also this was just a confidence boost of, lad, realise how good you are. Realise that, like, forget the fee or whatever. You are here for a reason because we've identified you being good enough. We're not a football club who go and spend ridiculous money on crap players. We're a football club who's really measured and actually pretty safe on what we do. You wouldn't be here if you weren't good enough. And it just felt like we were really trying to get behind Darwin Núñez, which, you know, I think we can all probably bet that Jurgen, if he was angry, he wouldn't want to be around him. But we also know that he was one of the players who would never throw his players under the bus and he'd wrap his arm around them. And it was good to see that. It was Pep Lijnders doing that. It was Vitor Matos. It was all of them. It was an entire group of people who set that standard, who set that. And yeah, it was lovely to see that kind of insight was boss to see. I mean, to this day, it's not worked. But, you know,
even that in itself is fascinating. The fact that actually it probably hasn't worked, and I don't listen. Who knows? We're sitting here right now recording as this doc comes out. There's a good chance Darwin Núñez leaves Liverpool in the summer. That's about to follow us. So maybe, you know, they're trying their best. But it's weird that was his first season, Darwin, and we're still having those issues. It was the first season, wasn't it? Or, no, mid-second. I think I'm right in saying. At that time recording, and we're still having those issues a little bit now. It kind of shows, you know, maybe that's something that we have to.
Sometimes things just don't work out in life, and it can't, like,
and it's not through a lack of effort.
It's not through a lack of effort from anyone. And also, Darwin Núñez might go to a different Premier League club and be absolutely sensational because that's just, you might just fit that team better. Things just might click for you. Something just hasn't clicked so far. But it's interesting to see the fact that, like, I think we've got two different approaches. It's interesting to see now because in the last week, Arne Slot came out and absolutely ridiculed Darwin Núñez for his work effort and said, like, you know, you can miss chances. I'm fine with you missing chances. I'm not fine with you not putting in the work and like pressing and giving absolutely everything. And then we played Newcastle the other day, and he very much, in those little 5 minutes that we saw him play, it looked like he was getting the effort there. So you've had Jürgen and Jürgen's staff who've put an arm around him and tried to help him and gave him a confidence boost. And I think Slot at times has done that in terms of, you know, he's backed him in press conferences, but he's also, unlike Jürgen, tried to give him some tough love. And it's clear that none of that is really...
So far not really so good. Again, back and forth throughout it. This is where, again, I'm guessing this is a bit of a history lesson. It goes back to 2018 and the battles of City and the titles, I don't know. But again, to add context. And then it comes back, and unfortunately, this is where Liverpool get beat up in the cup by Man United. And then they go to Brentford. This is another part that I found fascinating, where you learned a little tidbit, and perhaps Jürgen's, I don't know if disagreements, or there's hints of disagreements, or disillusionment or whatever, with like medical staff and injuries. I will read the quote, a couple of them. So first of all, him and Pep Linders are talking, they're like, oh yeah, you know, sometimes as coaches, we have no idea how to deal with injuries. Sometimes you have to just pretend that it's all fine, and because it's not. Liverpool at this point in this season are going through a pretty significant injury issues. And then Jürgen's at a press conference, he's talking about the issues and Liverpool having major injury problems. And then it goes to an interview recorded at the time for the doc, and he says, Chloe, for people who ask me what do I need to do to be a football manager, now I say, first study medicine, because he goes, over the years, my job as manager, I have to make all the decisions, and that's fine, it's my job. But one thing I can't decide is who is fit or not fit. I don't have the expertise to say, well, he can play. It feels at this point, again, this is in the middle of an injury crisis. We know how bad Liverpool's injuries were around that time. It's around Brentford. They lose Curtis Jones. There's loads. Jota goes. There's loads of them out at this point.
Salah plays, doesn't he? And then Salah gets injured.
Alison's already out at this point, and the injury list is massive.
I think there was like 8 up to 11.
And it ends up as 11. And it was just a little peak. Because there's always been a little mumbling at times and rumours spreading around, like, sometimes there was clashes between Jürgen and the medical staff. You know, there was physios leaving and doctors left, and it was all a little bit. And this was the first point where it didn't exactly say it, Chloe, but you got the feeling there was some disharmony there, because there are clearly people. Even, you know, I remember Jürgen saying about Stefan Bajcetic, he looks fine, I don't know why he can't play. Like, it felt like this was a little hint that there was something behind the scenes there with these injured lads of, are you sure he's injured? Why is he getting injured all the time? Is he not fit? There was clearly something going on there, and that comment was really, I thought, quite eye-opening. Yeah,
it was. And look, we know the level of intensity that Jürgen's philosophy demanded, and it was a lot. And, you know, a lot of players picked up muscle injuries and little niggles, and it felt like that season players had come back and 2 seconds later they'd be out injured again. And it did feel like a little bit of a dig. And also, it's interesting because, like, that's just something that I would never, ever, ever think, like, it's just not your problem. You just deal with what you've got to do. But the fact that he turned around and, like, he clearly had a little bit of doubt there. Like, could I have actually pushed a couple of them? Like, did they need to be out for that long? It feels like, Chloe, because, like, were we too protective? Yeah, it's a bit like he's used to making all decisions, and he just clearly doesn't have the information. He can spot a player if a player is good enough. He knows if a player can be, you know, he trusts himself. Well, can I turn him into a defender, or can I move him, or shall I sign him? He doesn't. It felt like Klopp got frustrated that he doesn't know enough. Like, if you asked him again, he would love to be a biomechanical physiologist expert, whatever, because he doesn't like not being the man in control. He's very much a control freak. And also, if he understood the science of why that isn't possible, maybe you can deal with the fact that you've got 11 players a bit more. You can rationalise it a little bit better. But it's the fact that, like, how many times have I done it? I think Diogo Jota went down against Chelsea, was it this season? And all that happened was someone landed on him, and he was out for months, and I was sat there going, is someone taking the mick with me? Someone's landed on him, and that's it. But clearly there's something there that we've not been told, and things that I don't understand, you know, scientifically, of why a player can't come back or can't
I
be rushed or
related
can't
with
be fit.
Diego on it because sometimes I hate someone just telling me what has to happen.
Yeah.
And why is that? And then they explain
and it comes on, it's back on you. It's not on anybody else. You're taking the brunt for it all.
It's weird because, again, it's worth mentioning this. That's what he says behind the scenes in the doc. From facing to camera, he's very positive, and he says this. Sometimes you have to basically lie to your players and say, I think, and this is where we go on to the League Cup final, for example, in this part, a real good moment, of course, but we all remember he says, like, behind the scenes, we might be thinking of what we're going to do, but then we go to the players and we're like, no excuses. These are who we've got. We never once focus on who we haven't got. We focus. And then Pep Lander says, it was a line along the lines of, we have to be upbeat and joyful because if we're not, the players won't believe us. Yeah. He's basically saying we're lying to them, but we're making them convinced that we're not lying to them. Like,
placebo effect.
A little bit, but also a little bit maybe like, we all know we're without all these, no Mo Salah, Szoboszlai's out, Núñez is out, and they all went through the whole thing, but it's almost like giving them fake confidence. Yeah. Sometimes managers have to lie, and that was a real interesting one. That behind the scenes, he's fuming like, "Why? Where's all my players?" When he speaks to the players, he's like, "No, this is fine. We've got Jayden Danns, and we've got
11 players, and with 11 players, we'll give absolutely everything to try and get the final outcome." And it's good because no matter where you are, you cannot give your players an excuse, a reason. If you don't believe in them and if you don't set this kind of like, well, we'll give it a go and we'll see how we'll end up, then the players aren't going to buy into that either. And it's very much, he was the man. They all followed him. He was a leader for us. If he'd have told them to run through brick walls, they would have. So for him to then go there and say, actually, I don't think you're good enough. We're missing about 11 players. We can't do this. That's not setting the mindset that you need to get over the line and things. I think he also said throughout the doc, there was a point where he was like, I have to be the little bit of light. That is what I have to be. Yeah. When the players, I'm that light that the players need to see so that I can open a door and get the best out of them and make them see the positives in things. Even when he doesn't, necessarily want to see that outlook. So I think that's very important as well, because creating a very doom and gloom atmosphere is never going to get you anywhere. You need to be realistic at times, but you also need to make sure that no one is allowed to use excuses, because let's be honest, these lads earn millions and millions and millions of pounds, and you could understand they're already on mega money, they're on long-term contracts. So if they needed an excuse to not work as hard, then they'd use it.
Subconsciously, I might get it. Yeah. Pep Lander's, the line is, don't focus on who isn't there. If the players feel that we have doubt, it won't work. So if they had to convince themselves, and they did. Obviously, then it goes on to show the Carabao Cup final and the influence of the young lads and Jayden Danns in particular and things like that. So what did you make of episode 3? At the end of episode 3, was you thinking, okay, I'm all right here? Or was you still up a little bit? I thought maybe the bit about the medical staff, the little bit with Darwin Núñez, I found this bit more informative than the others.
Interesting. Yeah. I felt like the stories are interesting, absolutely interesting. Once again, it was just the back and forth of it all. And you know what I really hated? Obviously, they showed United in the FA Cup, but before that, you had it had gone back to a lovely time previously, and it was like, 1 second you're like, oh, that's really, remember that? And then all of a sudden I'm seeing Liverpool not do game management correctly, and it's taken me back to being in Old Trafford, losing in the final minute to United. It felt very it caught me off guard a lot of the time, going from a lovely little moment to then losing the league at Goodison Park. Oh my God. Yeah,
the last line on that was Virgil van Dijk asked what his head, and he goes, it was a very good cross by Costas, and it was a pretty good header by me. I thought that was a cool line by Virgil on that one. So we move on to episode 4 again. Episode 4 actually doesn't really go back in time too much. There's a couple of bits here and there, but it starts actually, and things are going wrong at this point in time. So it's the Atalanta loss. This was an interesting one. I found this one good, Chloe, in a listen, it's not a nice moment, of course, but Harvey Elliott got subbed off at half time in that game. And it goes then to the Elliott family and to Elliott to because we forget this, these are human beings. We just see a player get subbed off and go, right, he deserves to be subbed off. He had a stinker, he deserves to be hooked. And then it goes to his mum, and his mum's like, yeah, Harvey was devastated. He took it so badly. His dad, I was sat in the crowd watching my son get taken off at half time and hearing, little murmurs around, how Harvey's off, you know what I mean? That was a little bit of a light shone on, oh yeah, these guys, it doesn't just, they're not just machines, they are human beings, and they've all got parents and they've all got brothers and sisters who were affected by this. Again, it wasn't the nicest of moment, but it was at least informative and a nice reminder, you know, when you're online and you're tweeting about someone or you're calling someone shit or selling him, like, it does affect people. And I thought that was a real fascinating moment and a little bit of a light bulb moment, actually, because we do this all the time. And I'll be honest, one time I remember an ex-Liverpool player coming up to us and he was like, oh, watch the show. And we were like, oh God, you know, sometimes we've been a bit critical. And the player, I won't name his name, and he was like, no, you've always been fair with me. I've never once felt like you said anything that was completely out of order. And I took that as a real positive in that we were fair, you know what I mean? Sometimes it can go over the top. And, and this was only Harvey getting taken off in a game that he probably underperformed, and he knew he underperformed.
But there was about 10 other players on the pitch who also did.
And there was a sense of, it felt like he was a little bit scapegoated there, and that was the undercurrents that was given. But how did you find this, seeing like the Elliott family reacting to that whole situation? Yeah,
it makes it a bit more personal, because you realise, especially with them being massive Liverpool fans, sometimes you forget that their hardest critic are actually themselves. So when you pile on it as well, and I think it's absolutely fine to, at the same time, still say he's had a stinker of a game or he's had a shocker of a game, because, you know, that's fair to say, as long as you're not going online and abusing them, that's fine. To admit that someone hasn't played their best is okay. You just don't hurl abuse at them. But what I do remember is I thought we got absolutely torn apart that game, and I still think we did. But in the game, it shows moments of Harvey hitting the bar and the post, and there was a couple more chances that Liverpool probably should have capitalised on. It was only 1-0 at half-time. So actually Liverpool were really still in that game, and we fell away. And in the moment, like, I come back from that game and I feel like Liverpool were just really, really poor, got dominated. And I still think that's the case. But you also forget the fine margins in football, because if he scores that absolute worldie top bins, then maybe the game's not like that, because that's before they've scored a goal. So yeah, I enjoyed seeing the player aspect side of it. Just once again, I didn't. It's just individual. Like, what's Harvey Elliott's family at Atalanta got to do with Jurgen? I
think I don't mind little side offs like that. I'll be honest. I found it. I kind of get it. I mean, you mentioned before.
I just think it all needs to be collectively in one.
It isn't as much about Jurgen Klopp as perhaps you would. There are side stories to it. I mean, you mentioned before about there's no spin-offs and like getting taken down. They did the opposite here, because Liverpool's season was going to pot. It was nice to see them winning the Champions League at this moment, and there was various times where the show was winning the Premier League title, and it was like, oh well, these are nice. But then, sticking back to the main theme now, which is Jurgen's last story, it goes to Crystal Palace, and Liverpool lose at home to Crystal Palace, effectively ending their chance of becoming Premier League champions. The line, "I've got nobody to blame besides myself for not getting inside the boys' heads."
This was good.
That was like...
This was good.
Yeah, would you think that was like...
He's not got the dressing room. That is
yeah, I was like, is he questioning the attitude? What's that about? That was odd.
This is the last episode, isn't it?
Yeah.
So at the end, he turns around in the interview and he talks about how someone's going to come in with a new philosophy, new motivation and energy to go again, and a new kind of project to give the players to buy into.
Do you think when he says that line, he's saying like, I'm almost right in my decision, yeah.
Yes.
I've looked at these lads and we're trying to win a Premier League title.
I've said the same message too many times. I can't. There's no way I can rephrase this same message. I agree. To get them to go back to running through brick walls to me at the very, very start.
That's what I took from it.
Like, there's only so many times my same voice saying the same, like, context, but with just different words thrown in, that there's only so many times that works. And I think he just kind of realised that at this moment they'd listened to the same message far too many times.
That's what I took from
He'd used it too many times. And this is why it was really interesting, because what we've the whole difference, and you've heard reporters, journalists, other ex-footballers from all other clubs, by the way, turn around and say, I'd love to work for Jurgen Klopp. I'd love to work under Jurgen Klopp, because the way he makes players buy into his philosophy, like they will give everything for his success, to be, one of him. They see him as a leader. They follow him. They'll do anything he says. And it's just him basically saying at the end, I couldn't do it anymore. I didn't have the energy or the motivation or the way to say it to make them buy into it. And they also had heard the philosophy, the same line, time and time and time again, and you've exhausted it.
I found it interesting because next is the you brought up a few times the derby at Goodison Park, and there's a lot of family, Everton family, and taking the piss and all that, which is fine. I don't understand it was needed, but it was in there. This is where you got a real insight, because Jürgen at the time, in press conferences, in interviews and stuff, he was very, not upbeat, but he was like, okay, it is what it is, we're working hard, we're doing our best. But then you see a moment where they've gone to film for this documentary and the man asks him, can you tell me what you were feeling before the Everton game? Obviously the guy's just trying to get a bit of context, and Jürgen bites his head off. And the exact quote was, oh, now I have to go back to that fucking Everton game, which I've tried so hard to get out of my mind, and tell you what I thought before this fucking game. Anyway, it'll probably all be wrong because we played as shit as we did. That showed a man who is like, because that was filmed at the exact time. It goes back again later to Jürgen now, and he's much more chill and much more calm, and he's able to speak a bit less emotionally. I found that really fascinating, Chloe, in that his head had gone. Like he was doing this documentary in a season that was at this point falling apart, and he's lost his shit with the guy whose job it is just to ask him a question and make this documentary. I thought that was a really clever thing to leave in, because it's almost like breaking the fourth wall. It's like he's looking, it's like, oh yeah, this is a documentary and this guy's trying to get something out of him, because usually the man would go, tell us what you think, and you would never hear the question, and you go, I don't know, and you're going to go, oh yeah, I remember before that Everton game, I was feeling like, maybe we had a chance at winning the league if things went right. He was in no mood. Like, at this point in time, he was very, very angry.
But if you go back to, I remember the press conferences and everything after Everton, you could tell in the moment that loss hurt him more than anything else. Like, we lost the league actually against Crystal Palace. We'd lost against Atalanta. We weren't coming back in that tie. We were 3-0 down. And yet the Merseyside derby, him losing his first ever Merseyside derby, I think it was, but him to lose his last Merseyside derby, even in the press conferences afterwards, in the interviews, he was like, I'm sorry to the Liverpool fans. Like, you could tell that loss weighed so much more on him than anything else that had happened. He was able to brush a lot of it off and try and see a positive mindset, or just put it into context and sit back. He couldn't at that moment, and even afterwards. He couldn't get past losing the Merseyside derby because he knew how much it meant to the city, how much it meant to Liverpool fans. And that was interesting to see, because, like you said, for a lot of the time, you've got this, the reason we adored him so much was because he realised that football actually, it was vitally important, we live and breathe it, but it was the important of the least important. And that was always his outlook. And you always was like, you know what, he's correct. Like, you can see past it. There's bigger things in life. There's bigger pictures. With that, you could just tell in the moment, he was like, if there was one thing that I needed to do, it was to get a decent result. And in my last ever Merseyside derby, and instead, I've gave them bragging rights for them to sing what they sing. And I've lost my last Merseyside derby, and it's the Liverpool fans that
it made me feel, Chloe, at this point. I was always like, is he making the right decision? And we've always said it was his decision. He knows it's the right decision. Watching that, it was the right decision.
Oh yeah.
And then he blamed himself for not creating an atmosphere that removed the pressure off the boys. He said, we should have been winning trophies, and it's my job to get everyone feeling less tense. And he felt the tension.
Do you reckon he was talking about the fact that he'd announced that? Do you reckon he was hinting at that?
Maybe, or just the fact that he thinks that everything he tried wasn't working, and he's like, I don't know what else I could be doing. Maybe you're right. He also says, we built for a long time, but we couldn't use the base we created. I think he's really upset that season fell apart, and I don't think he blames anyone but himself. Which is quite sad, really, because he shouldn't. It was a collective thing where loads of things went against them. Again, you have a little look back at Liverpool winning the title and stuff like that, and then we get this is the goodbye, and this is kind of as live again. First note, he has to sign like 150 shirts with normal one on the back, giving everyone a present. Every single person gets a personalised, and their name and a signed shirt, which was a very nice touch. You go through the emotions of the Wolves game, his final ever game. You see how emotional Pep was at that point, and he's in tears. And then, it's the end. And what I took relatively positive from Chloe is the ending of this documentary was like, Jürgen's sound. Because if you see him, and I'm sure you guys have watched it by now, when he's speaking about that Everton game, to that last moment of him leaving, it's chalk and cheese. He looks like a man, the weight of the world has lifted off his shoulders. He felt so under pressure, he was knackered, he was done in, and yet he's walking out and he says like, this, I want to read this quote out because I said it now. He says, "So I've just left my office for the last time. I will be fine. And more importantly, the club will be too. And as you've seen the team, wow, that's a bunch of really good people. They will be fine or even more." And it's brilliant that this... I was always worried about this documentary coming out in the season because thinking, oh my God, it's going to be a distraction. It comes out on the day where Liverpool have gone 13 points clear at the top of the Premier League. That's perfect time because he's gone, they'll be fine and maybe even more. And it turns out they're probably going to be Premier League champions. And I just felt that was a real nice moment that he walked off into sunset with a big smile on his face. He looked chill, he looked cool. And everyone was dead sad for him. But all those people he left behind who were so sad are now so happy. I think a real classy way to end the whole thing.
This is the best part of the entire documentary.
Seeing how he looks cool and chill.
Because we've had to go through, by the way, a horrendous season. I know we won the League Cup, but emotionally it was the most draining season I've been through, and we lost the league by a point several times. So like they were emotionally draining, but in a different way. This was emotionally draining because for how long did we live in fear of, that's the greatest ever manager I'll ever see manage Liverpool? Like that was my mindset. It was, you know, I was so scared of what was to come next because I didn't know what to believe. You don't know how Liverpool as a club, as a team, are going to react to a new manager and how quickly someone's going to get their thoughts and process and philosophies across. But I enjoyed it ending in this way because I think it's fair to say Jurgen deserved to win more than what he did at Liverpool. And sadly, he was up against a juggernaut in Manchester City and cheats. That meant that he didn't. Yeah. However, even, I think it mentions Shankly in this episode as well. And I lived for that at the start of the 4th episode, I think it was. Because this... Jurgen Klopp is Shankly 2.0.
It did feel like and it's all Shankly to Paisley and then maybe Klopp.
And also, I've never seen that you hear Shankly's name being sung on the cup and how adored he was, and it's the exact same with Jurgen Klopp. It was left on his terms, and I think what we need to remember is, although we didn't win as much as we wanted to win last season, it was kind of a poor season. What he actually did in that season was set us up for the rest of the future. He put us in an incredible spot. He rebuilt an entire midfield, and not just did he do that, in his final game as Liverpool manager, he got on that stand in front of the Kop, in front of the 4 stands, and said to them, "Don't you dare not attack this next season because you need to buy into this manager."
Some of the next fellas sang his name.
Yeah, you need to buy into this fella. You need to give absolutely every bit of energy, and you need to go from it from the very off. I think he knew Liverpool actually have a chance.
That's exactly. I was about to say.
It was like he knew.
Maybe it's because we're living with the knowledge that Liverpool are good now, and Liverpool are probably going to be champions and could win loads of trophies. Fingers crossed they do. I took it as he was like, yeah, this team are really good, and it was like he was half blaming himself. I wasn't the man anymore to take them to it. A new fella will do it. I found it fascinating. Again, maybe that is just me talking in hindsight because again we're sitting here after a great week or so for Liverpool where they are, almost certainly going to be champions. But it was almost like he gave it like a knowing nod of, "Oh, you're going to be fine under this guy." I thought it was fantastic. I agree. Episode 4 for me was my favourite by far. There was ups and downs, and there were some real sad moments. I found it tough.
It's also because you get to see obviously us winning the league and things like that, innit? But mainly because at the end of it all, you realise that Jurgen Klopp wasn't just a man who brought Liverpool success in terms of trophies. He was a man who got the club to recognise exactly who they were and start acting like it again. Yeah. He built that club, and he connected us all. And to go on and win things in the future, you have to have the fans buying into absolutely everything. And he set that precedent of, just because I'm not here, don't you dare think you as a fan base can get away with not buying into this next manager, to not buying into these group of players who I've already brought together. Bear in mind, we've added a Chiesa since then, and that's it. Like, it was just like he knew, and he'd said it already, like, someone else is going to come in with so much more energy and motivation and a new, not philosophy entirely, but just a new way to speak to the players and get them to believe in it.
New mission, yeah.
And like that, it just felt like he knew that this team was good enough to do magical things, but he wasn't the person who had the energy to lead them to that final destination.
You know what I love about it is that he's right as well, and that's what I love, because everything he says, and bear in mind that wasn't filmed. Like, that was filmed a while ago. It was filmed as he was leaving. It was like, oh my God, he was right. Yeah. Like, he filmed that almost a year ago, and everything he says in it's true. Like, and that it gives you a bit of a good, like, he wasn't an idiot. He knew what he was talking about. And
even though we all thought he was an idiot at the time when he first released it.
And like, yeah, exactly. And even along the lines of like I love the fact that we saw that how. Again, now that I don't love this part, how the Everton result really hurt him and how he was feeling after it, to how he was when he walked out, and then how he is now, because again, they retrospectively went back and spoke to him. I took a great pride in that. But for me, overall, episode 4 was the best. As a documentary, sorry, Chloe, on top of as a whole 4 thing, how would you sum it up? Like, for example, ratings out of 10, must watch, okay? Because I'm thinking...
I mean, it's a must watch because it's Jurgen Klopp. So, like, I wanted to watch it because ultimately the 4th episode is the best one, because the last 15 minutes of the 4th episode is just what I wanted to hear once again, because it puts everything into perspective, and also I think in the final episode you see him like receive a load of like books and things of his time, and he says he looks at his photo when he first signed holding the scarf, and he goes, and this is why I'm leaving, because that person there, it looks like I've aged unbelievably, and that was only 9 years ago. He knew he had exhausted himself and he couldn't deal with it anymore. But like, my favourite quote from the entire thing comes from that 4th episode, where he's walking onto the pitch to receive his guard of honour by everyone, and he turns around and he says, in the end, it's about giving your absolute all, and then you have a little chance to get something for it. And that's a really honest thing. It's life in a nutshell. And that is the way I love, like, I loved him, the man himself. I loved how he just felt like he was one of us. He was a socialist. He was a Scouser. That is the way I looked at him. And he brought us success, and that was brilliant. But I loved the man that he was, and the way he was so good with words. And that being like the final thing is like, that's a motivation for life. That's not a motivation for this. He's basically turning around and saying, no matter what you do in life, give your absolute all to try and achieve it. And maybe, just maybe, you do it for the little tiny outcome that'll make you feel brilliant and give you the rewards that you deserve. It doesn't always happen, but at least you know you gave your 100% and gave absolutely everything to try and get that outcome. So yeah, the 4th episode is most definitely the best.
Overall grade for the
my only problem with it was the fact that it bounced to and from far too many times, and I just needed it to be chronologically in order and have a separate episode for like the academy players, and that was my only thing. I didn't enjoy the back and forth. But you know, I'd watch it because it's about Jurgen's last season.
I think I would go like 6 out of 10.
I think that's fair.
Which is fine.
And some people might love it more than us, because you might like the fact that it bounces around and it doesn't focus on, it's not chronologically in order. I just like that because I feel like it sets the scene a bit more.
I'll be honest, I was just expecting a bit more Jurgen Klopp.
Yes,
there wasn't loads of Jurgen. There was a lot of players.
I saw more of Harvey Elliott's dog than I did.
Which is hard. He's got a lovely dog, but yeah, that was only that. My thing was like, there probably isn't as much of Jurgen in this as I would have liked it to be, considering it's meant to be a Jurgen Klopp documentary.
But also, it's like they haven't been able to take footage of the last 9 years. So I also get that. Like, if they were allowed to use all the footage available to them, then they probably would have been able to do it chronologically and in a lovely little bow. But they haven't been able to do that, and they've got to link it to, you know, this season, because that's what they tried to do at the very outlook.
And finally, shout out to they used Redmen a little couple of times, didn't they? Chris's voice is definitely in it, Dan's voice is in it. We give them everything, to give them loads. They asked for it when they made it. I'm not sure, we mustn't have made the cut. I don't recall.
I don't know whether I don't.
Let us know. I don't remember
idea.
hearing any other voices, but there's definitely Chris and there's definitely Dan parts in it, which they're both very much delighted about in that one. So there you go. That is our review. Thank you very much for joining us for that show. Again, if you haven't checked out the documentary, like I say, go and watch it. I'll be honest, I don't think it's like the greatest documentary of all time, but I definitely think it's worth a little
There's interesting stories in there, and definitely. You'll come away and you'll enjoy little pieces of it.
And if you have watched it as well, let us know your thoughts. You're watching this on YouTube, let us know in the comments. You can listen to this as a podcast, you can get in touch on social media. But yeah, thanks from me, thanks from Chloe. That was our review of the wonderfully timed, I would guess. Great timing to bring it out. It wasn't the worst time, given that the mood is fantastic. Yeah, that was. It
puts it into perspective, doesn't it? He made the right decision in the end.
Absolutely. So yeah, thanks again. Like I said, that was make sure I get the title right. That was Doubters to Believers, Liverpool FC, Klopp's era in review. See you all soon.